Hello and welcome to MIP TV. And in this edition of Transactional Analysis Made Simple, Bob Cook is going to talk about Transactional Analysis Proper. That's something to get your head around, isn't it? Transactional Analysis Proper. In the last video we did scripts, so have a look at all the videos in our playlist as Bob explains all the theory of TA. But today we're looking at Transactional Analysis Proper. So tell us a bit about that, Bob.
Okay, so Eric Berne devised TA, 1961, and his first model of the personality was the model of ego states, which I've talked about in an earlier video, where people come from parent, adult, and child. Then he developed the idea of games, which we've talked about as well, and scripts. Alongside this, which makes the four cornerstones of TA, is a model of communication that he developed, which he called Transactional Analysis Proper. And why I use the word proper is because it's the idea that it's the development of external transactions, which actually mirror internal transactions, which he called proper TA.
Okay, Bob, give us an example of that.
So, for example, I'll just talk about 3 types of transactions that make up communication.
Okay.
And then I can give you some examples. So he talked about 3 classifications of transactions. So a transaction is when I say to you, "Hello, Rory," that's a stimulus. And you say, "Hello, Bob," and we get a response back again. So a transaction is a social unit it's a unit really of social action. So it's like, "Hello," and you say, "Hello" back again. So we've got a stimulus and we've got a response. So he saw there were 3 classifications. He actually had 5, but I'm going to talk about 3 here, of transactions that make up conversations. And by studying these transactions, you not only could help people look at how they communicate, but also how they internally communicate. So the 3 classifications: complementary, all right, ulterior, and crossed.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got 3 sets of transactions which make up conversations. Complementary. So the important thing is here that the response comes back from the ego state that is complementing the stimulus. So as I said, if I say hello to you, which is an adult, "Hello, Rory," you answer back the age you are, that would be "Hello, Bob." That would be a complementary ego state, complementary transaction, because the response is coming back from the stimulus which you aimed it at. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an adult-to-adult conversation.
Yeah, so if Jessica, who's my daughter, 3-year-old, says, "Mummy, will you put me to bed?" And Mummy said, "Oh, Jess, of course I will. I really love you, dear." And Jessica says, "Oh, please tell me a story." And my wife says, "Of course I'll read you a story." You've got a child-to-parent complementary transaction.
Yes, you could hear that in your voice, Bob. So when you talk about Jessica, that was definitely a child. Yeah. When you're talking about your wife, that was definitely a parent position. Yes.
Right. So that's complementary, and it's important, these classifications, because one of the sort of frameworks of this is that by changing ego states, you can determine the how can I explain, the conversational patterns. So, for example, a salesman who wants you to buy a car wants to entice the child in you, because from the child in you, you've got excitement and spontaneity, and you might just go and buy the car. So they want to be able to hook the child ego state. So what's the complementary ego state? It's parent. So they may say things, "It's really important you buy this car because it goes much faster," or it goes, whatever the enticement is, to the child, and the child then gets excited and brings out £3,000.
Yes.
For example.
Yes. Yes. So saying things like, "This is a really good car, and it goes really, really quickly."
Yes.
Yes.
And then the child then says, "I've always wanted to be a speedster, really."
Yes.
And the parent in the salesman said, yes, it's a very, very good car for you to buy.
Yes. In fact, I can share a small story here. When I bought a car a few years ago, the salesman spent a lot of time listing the features, looking out for the child response.
Yeah.
And he said, it's got Bluetooth. I said, how does that work? And that was it. I went from being an adult to a child. Show me how the Bluetooth works, because I love technology.
That's perfect. That's a perfect example. It's enticing the child, the
Yes.
spontaneity of the child to make a rash decision or a quick decision. Oh, I'll buy the car now. Oh, you better buy it now because it's the last one.
Yeah.
And the last one is the most important one, really, because it's actually da, 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 da. So entices. So that's a complementary transaction. Now, in terms of clinical work, if we think about it, if we think about how we want to perhaps entice to the unconscious child, we might use a nurturing parent channel to entice the child out, within the conversation in the therapeutic narrative, for example. Another really important classification is the idea of what he called crossed transactions. So the response comes back from the part of the personality that you don't expect the response to come back from.
Yes.
For example, that would be, it's 7 o'clock in the morning. This is a true story. It was slightly embroiled a bit, but anyway, it's 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm going out to my training group, and I'm just about to get in my car, and my wife puts her head out of the window, and I think she's going to say goodbye.
Yes.
Very naive, of course, 7 a.m. in the morning, by the way, Roy. But anyway, I look up, and as I look up to the window, she looks down. She says, "Bob, what about all these dirty socks that you've got here?" So that's a response that I didn't expect back.
Yes.
So it's a cross transaction. So I expect a nice either adult, "Goodbye, Bob," and she says, "And what about all these dirty socks?" So there's a cross up, and then the golden rule is something else is likely to happen. So in fact, what I did is I drove off at 50 miles an hour, really fed up.
Yeah.
But I actually came back again.
Yeah. So the thing with cross transactions is they tend not to last very long, do they?
That's right. They stop the conversation.
Yes.
They stop the conversation. You often find it a lot in the therapeutic dialogue when people want to not answer the question, or in fact, they don't want to go into the relational inquiry, or in fact, they want to deflect you, distract you, move away from taking ownership or responsibility. So what they do is they what happens is a cross transaction, and it stops the conversation or changes the conversation.
Yes. It's interesting, isn't it? We see it so often, don't we? Certainly with the parent-child, a lot of people think it could be, physically a parent and a little child, but you can have that in relationships, can't you? You can have one partner who plays the parent and the other who plays the child, and that can go on forever.
Yeah, and one thing we might talk at a later date is the idea of how we do therapy with couples from a TA standpoint.
Yes.
And of course, that is exactly what you're talking about, the transactional analysis dialogue from the parent or the child, and how it stops real adult-to-adult intimacy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so to recap, when we talk about this model, we're talking about adult to adult, which is a conversation or a dialogue which is based in our developmental ages and also in the here and now.
Correct. So a third classification, just to finish off the three major ones.
Yes.
And I think a really important one. So we've had complementary, we've had cross as the conversation goes on. And quite right, what you've just said, cross transactions stop the conversation.
Yes.
Now, a very important one, which I really think about a lot clinically, is ulterior transactions.
Yes.
So this is the idea that in conversations, there's a social message, and linked with this social message is a psychological message. So you have two together. So it's like, here's an example of my training group. One of the trainees says to the big training group of 15 people, "It's hot in here," which means, think about it, for an ulterior, it means, will somebody open the window?
Yes. Sorry. Yeah. So I thought you were going to finish the story.
No, I wanted that on purpose, because it's like That's exactly what happened in the training group. No one spoke.
Yeah.
Now, the person expected somebody to rescue them
Yes.
from a parent position and open a window.
Yeah.
That happens all the time. Another one would be, I love watching football, for example. I'm a Manchester City supporter, for example. I'm really enjoying the World Cup, but I can tell you what, my wife doesn't like football much. And so here's another example. I'm watching football. Stephanie comes home. She looks at the television and she says, football again, which
Yes.
really means go upstairs and watch the football upstairs. Well, I can watch
Yeah.
it downstairs.
Yeah.
We have these psychological and social messages
Yes.
all the time.
Yes.
Now, clinically, really important, because as a psychotherapist counselor, we will see the psychological message or intuitively know the psychological message. And sometimes I know that means going into the child unconscious places that the person doesn't want to go to or may find it hard to go to. And it is to my detriment, because if I don't, the golden rule is that the psychological message from the child usually determines the behavioral outcome. In other words, for example, if I hadn't have gone upstairs and watched the TV, then my wife would have gone on, and eventually I'd have gone upstairs.
Yes.
So the psychological outcome determines the outcome of the day.
Yes.
That's important clinically. Because you see, if we don't address the psychological message, the person will probably act out to actually get the psychological message or desire over.
Yeah, so it can be, I'm not saying that your wife does this for a minute, stamping about or slamming doors.
No, I'm reading examples, yeah.
Yes, but that would be an example of somebody whose needs aren't being met and isn't articulating what they want.
Yeah, or a really comical one, which is a true one, by the way, which I use on my Introduction to TA course. And I think in my days, it goes like this. The social message is, come and see my etchings tonight.
Yes.
Now, which really means let's go to bed or something.
Yes, let's have sex, basically, doesn't it? Yes.
What's the modern day one? It is something like this. Oh, come on, let's go up and come in and let's do Netflix and chill.
Yeah. Oh, I've got to come back for a coffee.
Yeah, or it's the equivalent.
Yes.
Clinically, ultimately important, because if we don't address the psychological ulterior messages,
yes,
we often miss the client.
Yes, that's true, because we're not connected to them. We're out of phase, aren't we, with them?
Yeah. So this model of communication is very important to look at how communication develops, how we can not move past a stop place, look for ulterior messages, look at complementary transactions, which will go on indefinitely unless we change them. We know with politicians, they just go on indefinitely, parent-to-parent ulterior transactions. Clinically, I think it's really important to think of ulterior transactions, though, because you are right. In the service of connection, that's where we need to go.
Yes, because it's a way, I guess, if the client is using an ulterior transaction with us, what's happening is they're not amplifying their needs. They're being, as we'd say in the humanistic world, incongruent. Correct.
That's very good. I really like that way of thinking. And I think about this a lot. 33 years on, I think, well, if I don't address the psychological message I see, they will act out in some way for me to actually see it. So I might as well address it now.
Yeah. How would you address that, Bob?
Well, let's put a caveat there. Well, timing is the key here.
Yes.
Actually, in the first phase of psychotherapy, which is building up trust and working alliance, I might see the psychological message, but in the service of building up the relationship, put it in a compartment.
Yes.
Now, when I've got a trusting, working enough relationship, and they also, I can see these psychological messages, which are usually played out non-verbally, by the way, through agitation, through movements in the body, through non-verbal gestures. I might then very gently, in the relational inquiry, help them to be aware of what they're not aware of.
Yeah. And actually, I'm just thinking that as you're describing that, that links in, of course, to transference, doesn't it? Very, very strongly.
Big time. And you could say, and I think Eric Byrne says this, he says, if we're not into adult to adult transaction, and in other words, if there's not adult to adult transactions, the other three sets of transactions are all in the realm of transference.
Yeah. And that is where the client is playing out their history, isn't it? Where they're playing their history out in the therapy room. They're seeing the therapist as someone other than a new person, a therapist. They may be thinking of talking to the father or the mother, or
that's right. And transacting, from a different ego state, like I've just been talking about, which corresponds to the transference to the projected other. Yeah.
Well, you know what? It's fascinating. One of the things that really strikes me is that we kind of come from two different worlds. You from the transactional analysis world, myself from the humanistic world, and I know there's a lot of crossover here. One of the really interesting things that I'll take away from this is the challenge and seeing that incongruence or that ulterior transaction, as you say in TA language, is one that should really only be challenged when the relationship is strong enough and can support the challenge.
Very, very, very important that. Because the first step is to get the working relationship and to help the person tell their narrative and their initial story. And later on, when you know the clients, you are able to gently challenge. So we both come from the same frame of reference.
Absolutely. Well, you know, Bob, that is a fascinating insight into what I think you may refer to as the functional model of TA. There's a structural, which is parent, adult, and child. And the functional model is effectively, clues in the name, it's how it works, isn't it? How it functions.
The 5 ego state, you know, nurturing parent, controlling parent, adult, free child, adapted child. And we could, and in another video, talk about the transactions from the different parts of the functional model. I hope I've given a clear insight into the theory of communication, which Eric Byrne called Transactional Analysis Proper.
Yes. So if you're watching this and you're wondering how that might play out, when you go out into the world, maybe after you've watched this, just keep an ear out for how people transact. Are they transacting with you in an adult way, in the here and now? Or are they coming from a child place? Or are they coming from maybe a parent place? And also keep an eye out for your own process with that. Where are you coming from within that conversation?
So when you say to your client when you see your first client, you say, of the morning, say, would you like to have a cup of tea? Now, are you saying it from your parents? Are you saying it from an adult? You're saying it from a child. Now, the way I just said that with my more nurturing channel, that is probably from parent. Now, if I say, would you like a cup of tea? You know, the way I say it often dictates the transaction.
So it's very, very important, isn't it, to be aware as a therapist of, where possible, coming from an adult position.
Correct. Unless we want to hook the child, just like the salesman did, I said that earlier on. Then we might choose to come from parent.
It's fascinating, Bob. Thank you so much for explaining the structural model of TA, or as you refer to it, TA proper. Have a look at the rest of the playlist, because there's lots of videos. We've covered scripts, and we've covered games, and we've covered TA, the functional model, the basic, the parent, adult, and child. So have a look at all of those.
Contracting is next.
And we're going to be doing the next video. You're right. We're going to be doing contracting. Very important and quite a unique, element of transactional analysis. So keep watching, and I'll say in a very adult way, I'll see you next time.
I'll see you next time. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.